Hi and welcome to another episode of Conversation with a Chef. I'm Jo Ritty and I love sharing with you the conversations I get to have with talented and passionate chefs. It's the backstory, if you will, to the food they're putting up. I begin today by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, traditional custodians of the unceded land where this conversation takes place, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Francesca Giorgi Monfort didn't set out to become Melbourne's most interesting pie maker. The Swiss-born chef's path has been anything but straightforward. From PR and art galleries in London to restaurant management in Europe and finally to the kitchen where she found her true calling. After working at Farmers' Daughters, Marion, and heading the kitchen at Noisy Ritual, Fran decided to do things her own way. What began as an experiment with puff pastry has become Frankie's Pie Shop, a cult favourite at the Carlton Farmers Market, known for pies with personality. Her cauliflower cheese pie, inspired by a Tesco recipe but elevated with charred vegetables and proper technique, is a perfect example of her ethos. Simple, done brilliantly. For now, she's beginning a residency at Superette on Sydney Road in Brunswick, selling 2 flavours of pies and 2 sausage rolls every day. I met Fran at Superette and I'm especially grateful for her patience. It was my first video podcast and she couldn't have been more generous as we talked about pastry that gets more rest than she does, the quiet resilience behind Frankie's, and her belief that vegetarian pies can and should be far more than vegetable stew. Thank you for being my first video.
Yeah, happy to be your first.
So excited. Yeah. And so we're in Superette down on Sydney Road in Brunswick, and you're working out of the kitchen here, but about to do something else a bit exciting here. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I guess this is my news that as of this Saturday, the 8th of November, I'm going to be selling 2 flavors of pies and sausage rolls here at Superette, and they'll be available every day.
Amazing.
Yes.
So let's talk about the pies, because it's Frankie's Pie Shop, and I met you at an Airbnb thing, which I can't go into.
Yeah. We know it.
You told me about the pies, and then I read about your pies in Broadsheet, and then I finally got to the market in Carlton, and actually did my first eating on camera, which was...
Oh, really? So another first.
and afterwards noticed I had pie all over my face and everything, but I went with it because the pies were so delicious, and I think that there should be pie,
absolutely,
flakes on you. And I just, I did say on my post, and I hold to this, is that it was the best pie I've ever had.
Oh, no way. Thank you.
And it was a cauliflower cheese pie, which...
Big statement.
It is a big statement. And cauliflower cheese doesn't really say what it actually is, because there was because cauliflower cheese is, like an old English.
Yeah, a classic, I guess. Yeah.
That pastry was so beautiful, and then the filling was so great. So
thank you. Yeah. It was that one was my first pie too. The first flavor that I came up with. So definitely, it's one that I guess am biased towards, or I always recommend for sure. But yeah, I think I told you that pie. Well, that recipe, I was inspired by a Tesco recipe. I was looking for a simple pie flavor. At the time, I was working at Noisy Ritual, and we decided to make pies for their anniversary. And I thought, okay, I'll come up with a veggie one and a meat one. And did a bit of research, had never really made pies before. I had assembled pies and, made the fillings for the pies we made at Farmers' Daughters, which is what kind of the shape and the no waste approach, doing them square as opposed to circle or round, is where I got my inspiration from. This Tesco recipe came up, and I was reading it, and I just found it very bland and boring, and it reminded me a bit of those boiled veggies that you eat as a child, and that puts you off veggies for a few years.
Yeah.
And I love the flavor of charred anything, but especially I find that when you char a vegetable, you really manage to add, the wanky people will call it, a layer flavor and whatnot. But really, it did the trick, and then using good ingredients, making everything from scratch is just the key to, I think, making something simple good.
Yeah,
I reckon.
And And I thought when I first heard about you that it was a bold move, being from Switzerland and saying that Aussie pies were quite dull and that you were going to do better, but you have.
Or trying.
So then I was thinking, is it the filling or is it the pastry? And it really has to be both.
Yeah, well, as a Kiwi, I guess you're biased too. And it's so funny how every Kiwi that comes to my stall, they will announce themselves and they'll tell me that they're a Kiwi and they'll tell me how important pies are and how high, how do you call them, expectations they have.
Yes.
I guess most of the time they've been, surprised or pleased, which is great. But yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm sorry to diss Aussie pies. I love an Aussie pie, but it's true that I found that no matter where you are, whether it's in Queensland or Victoria or New South Wales, it's always the same flavors. And it's very uninventive and it's very copy-paste and it's the safe option. But it is also how a lot of Australians eat, They don't necessarily aren't tempted by something a bit different. They go for their classic schnitties and, what they know they like. But I guess that's where, when I was growing as a chef and I always wanted to start a business, I never knew what it was going to be. And then I had a time where I was off work for a bit, and that time was really eye-opening because I realized that, potentially there was a niche for an actual gourmet pie shop in Melbourne, the food capital of Australia. And, maybe that idea couldn't necessarily work, I don't know, in Bendigo or Ballarat, but it definitely, I think there's a spot for it in Melbourne. And yeah, I got started and I decided to just do things my way. I'm not a pastry chef, so I had to learn how to make pastry.
Yeah.
And that's how I got involved with wildlife. It was December at the time. I think it was December 24. And I was off work and I had some time off. And I just thought, I'm going to reach out to a couple of bakeries and tell them that I want to learn and see if I can, do a stage or anything. And wildlife got back, and it just happened that one of their chefs was on holiday, and so we made a deal where I was chefing, and then when I was done chefing, I would go in with the pastry chefs and assist them and watch and observe and learn. And Leah, the pastry chef from Wildlife, really helped me at the very beginning to really nail the recipe and work on it, and different heights and different flavors and different things. And then eventually we nailed the one that we're using now, but it's always a work in progress.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what are the challenges with pastry? What can go wrong?
Oh, puff pastry is not difficult to make. It's not like croissant dough. I find croissant dough another, what's the expression? Another
layer, but
anyway, another kettle of fish was the one that I'm looking for.
Yep.
But puff pastry is very technical. So once you know the technique, it's fairly easy to do. You just got to learn the technique. But what's difficult is that it needs to rest. And I joke how much more rest my pastry gets than me, for example, It's temperamental with temperature because all I use is like 4 or 5 ingredients, flour, water, butter, salt, and sometimes vinegar as a natural preservative. That's it. And, if it's 25 degrees outside, you'll feel it straight away. Even your body temperature will melt your puff or your dough. So you got to be really quick. You got to learn to work in and out of the fridge depending on how hot your room gets, and make sure to give it the rest that it needs, because otherwise it's going to react differently during cooking. I've had a lot of accidents.
How long does it rest?
Oh, well, I make classic puff. And the best way to make it is over 3 days, where the first day you make the base, the dough. Second day you start the lamination. So you'll do, depending on how puffed you want your puff, you'll do more or less laminating turns. I think that's how we call them. And that's what I do on day 2. And then day 3, I flatten it and I assemble the pies. That's in an ideal world, 3 days.
Yeah.
You can still make it happen in 2 days, which is what I try and do on Mondays and Tuesdays. But yeah, it does need to rest at minimum 4 hours, but 4 hours is never enough. Like when I do it for 4 hours, it doesn't, overnight is the best.
Okay,
yeah.
And does it depend on the quality of the flour and the butter as well?
A little bit, yeah. The butter definitely is the most important ingredient, I'd say, because you can use different types of flour. You can make puff with only regular plain flour, but I use a mix of plain and strong flour. But butter is really the key. The drier the butter is, the better. And in fact, it was a bit of a challenge for me to find a butter that I was happy with in Australia, because there's not that much choice compared to Europe, where it comes from. There's so many butter manufacturers and suppliers, etc. And a lot of good butter that bakeries and whatnot use here is imported. Yeah, but I am obsessed with trying to make it as local as possible. And so in the end, I settled with St. David's Dairy, which is my butter supplier, and I'm very happy with their product. And it really matters to me that I know that, this butter was made from happy cows. And yeah.
And so we've talked about the pie that I ate, and I know there's another pie in the oven waiting for me, which is great. That's the Reuben. So what are the flavours that you're going to have out of Superette?
Yeah, so I thought it made sense to. Well, I came up with the Reuben pie a while ago, and it was definitely a hit. And because Superette Wildlife is a bakery, I just thought it made sense to tie in, a classic sandwich that works in a pie, because proven and tested, and it was really good. So it's going to be the Reuben pie, and then kimchi and folded eggs for the vegetarian pie option. And then 2 sausage rolls, which is going to be another bestseller of mine, the Italian meatball and pecorino sausage roll. And the vegetarian version is ricotta, tomato, and fennel seed, which is a bit more classic and traditional, but still very nice for veggie options. Yeah. I make a point to try and do good veggie options, because I find veggie pies especially to be very boring, or it's often a vegetable stew and that's it. So yeah, I try and make veggie pies better for sure.
Yeah, and they sure are. And when I arrived, we had quite a discussion about rough puff, which sounds like something else altogether.
Yeah, but that's how it's called. I didn't coin the term yet. No.
And what's the difference? So you're using rough puff for the sausage rolls?
Yeah, so what I wanted... So until now, I've been making all my products with classic puff, so the 3-day process. But lately, I started experimenting with rough, just because it's slightly cheaper. You can make it in 1 day as opposed to 2, 3. And so therefore, it's also faster. And, I'm getting close to potentially getting a lease, or, getting a pop-up space as well on top of the residency that I'm going to be doing here at Superette. And so I'm looking at all my costings and what labor is going to look like, etc. But saying that, I actually started noticing that I really like to use puff just for the sausage rolls, because I like how I find it slightly crisp, flakier, basically. And if I can find a way to make it to have a better end product, and on my end, make my life easier, that's what the draft that you saw over there, I was experimenting with rough puff when Joe walked in today. So that's what it was about. So, yeah.
And we also discussed off camera now, actually, some of the challenges that surround setting up a food business on your own. And well done. I mean, your story, you're very resilient. So you had the idea.
Yeah, 2 years ago now.
2 years ago. And
what did I go through?
If you're willing to share the trauma.
I guess I can call it a bit of a trauma. Yeah.
Highlights, but what does it take to set up a business on your own here?
Yeah, well, I definitely wish I had bigger pockets, or a bit more financial help. And I started off everything as on a temporary visa too, so without any assistance from, can't get loans, government help, or any grants or anything. So it was all my savings and whatnot. But I find that the process is not that straightforward, where you really need to do so much homework as to what permits do you need, how much is everything going to cost you, how can you make it work? And I don't have my own space. I've been working at the back of Superette, in their kitchen after hours when they close. If you see the lights on in the evening, it's me. I guess I got really lucky to have my own kitchen space to use, because the worst case scenario is those rental kitchens for $100 an hour. And, without your storage space, I complained that I only have one single door and a couple of freezer shelves. But I guess those restrictions, if anything, have allowed me to become better, because when you have restrictions, you have to work within those, and I guess you need to be creative as to how you can make your life easier when everything is so difficult already. But yeah, and to answer your question, because I'm going to go very far away otherwise, from the moment the idea was kind of born, and it took me probably 6 months I wanted to create a brand and come up with something that would resonate and with how I envisioned it. And I worked with a designer to help me, and he did a really good job at really translating my thoughts into images and, a logo and a brand identity. And from the moment that was born, and I had, with Leah from Wildlife, the pastry chef, we had nailed the puff, and I had a few flavors, only a few to start with, and I was inspired by Tarts and On of how they rotate the menu monthly, and I thought, how cool would it be to do that too, because I get very bored if I do the same thing on and on and on, so at least, I know it's always the same product, but at least by changing the filling, I can, stay creative, and I can have fun, and I can do something a bit different and change it up every then and again. But yeah, the journey to getting all it doesn't happen exactly. You do your timeline, and things do end up taking a bit longer. Yeah. So I think I plan to open in April, and in the end, by opening, I mean, launching my first market. I think in June was my first market, June 24. Finding a market was challenging because I really wanted the Carlton Farmers Market. They were my first choice. But at the time, there was another pie shop there, Pie Thief. And I only got the spot there because, unfortunately, Pie Thief closed. So that was lucky for me. And Carlton Market, Melbourne Farmers Market, they reached back and they were like, we have a spot now. And so that was really good, because the previous market I was at was not a foodie market. And I learned the hard way. I just wanted to start, I didn't know where. I just thought, okay, I want to be somewhere that kind of makes sense with what I'm trying to make. And Fitzroy seemed to be a good fit. And I started off at the Fitzroy Mills. It's always a very busy market, but it's a clothing market. And people there don't necessarily care about my specialty pies. They just want a cheap feed and a quick feed, Yeah. It wasn't, trial and error. You live and you learn. The first 6 months were tough because I was not necessarily at the most foodie market or the best market for me to start. But yeah, I guess as long as, what do they say? Adapt or die. I guess the journey is all about adapting and finding different ways to do things and figuring it out. And eventually you get closer and closer. And the goal is to open a shop. And that was my goal by the end of this year, to make it happen. And so far, I've had 3 rejections from 3 different places where, they found a better fit, or someone with deeper pockets, or better, more financially stable position, or rental history, which seems to be the main one. If I had rental history, yes. I feel that it would be a bit easier for me, commercial rental history. But yeah, so a pop-up potentially could be like a short-term thing the compromise for me to create that, or to have that rental history and to prove myself, because I feel like it's all about keep proving yourself when you're doing everything by yourself and as a small business. Yeah.
And I think for me, when I went, the day that I went to the Carlton Farmers Market, it was a really sunny day. There was an amazing guy singing, so you had like background soundtrack to, there was, everything was in abundance. There was some really great fruit and vegetables and some beautiful flowers, and everyone was really happy. And
so you were there on a good day.
I was on a good day, and I was going to say, and people were coming to you and saying, I've had your pies before, I love them, and you were, you've got such a great personality, and you're just chatting to everybody, and I'm like, well, what a great time. But that's on a good day.
That's on a good day.
And then when it rains or there's other things going on.
For sure, having a roof over your head, some businesses, I guess, perhaps take it for granted. When you're doing markets, you're very, very dependent on the weather. So it'll impact your numbers, but that's why a good market is so important if you're starting a food business, because that market has a really solid base of loyal customers that do their weekly shopping there and come back. And if I look at my numbers on those worst days, the return customers is really what allow me to keep going. So very grateful that that market has such a nice community. And I acknowledge as a small business, especially how important it is to have those repeat customers, because they're the ones that keep you going.
And I hadn't really thought about it, but when you said before that you can really manage wastage better when you've got a bricks and mortar shop, because you don't have to be cooking all of the product that you take to market. So that's, I hadn't really thought about that. And obviously in this day and age, but I feel like chefs have a great sense of how to prevent wastage.
It's growing. It's not there yet.
But it's part of the cost of everything, isn't it?
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I'm still shocked. I still work on the side. I still, do shifts left and right. And because I only do 2 markets a month. But to answer your question, I literally only have 2 sales opportunities per month where I make my batches, and I hope that I'm going to sell out. But if I don't, because it's been rainy or cold or public holiday or whatever, then, I have some leftovers, and that stock for sure wouldn't be a leftover if I was able to just refrigerate it or, keep it for the next day. Yeah, that wouldn't happen. But I feel like I missed something that you just said earlier.
About wastage?
Oh, yeah, wastage. Well, as a chef, as I've grown, and the direction I want to take is to, have the least waste possible, whether it's with food, which I find easier to control, or with anything, packaging or the equipment you use, et cetera, et cetera. My pies are square because I want to be, there's less wastage with the shape, but I did mention that just earlier. But some of the recipes that I've come up with are circular too. If I'll peel the potato for one recipe, I'll keep those peels and I'll puree them and add them, for example, in the beef mix. Or in the cauliflower pie, I use the stems, I use the leaves, they may be a bit bitter, and that's why the industry chucks them, because they're a bit bitter, they're not perfect. But I've chosen that, flavors, especially in a pie is such a great vessel to use your leftovers. Even at home, I love doing fridge puzzles and figuring out ways, okay, I didn't do my weekly shop, have random bits and bobs, and it's all about how can you combine them to, I guess, make something cohesive. And a pie is a great vessel for me to do that. And I guess having my own business, I'm able to choose, what goes to waste and, what do I want to work on, or how can I improve? And then, you speak to other chefs, and your vision or your ethos align, and, you get tips and tricks on how to do things better. But waste is a big problem. And I worked at Oz Harvest before I went off on my own, because I really care about educating people on how they can prevent food from going to the landfill. A lot of people don't know that, 10% of the world emission come from food waste or food being wasted and emitting methane as it decomposes in the ground. And I use the word decomposing loosely, because it actually really just rots away and doesn't really get to properly decompose as it would in a compost bin, which is where our food scraps should end, really. But it does take more logistics, and it does take a tiny bit more work, but I just think it's about structure, and it has to come from the top down. And I see so much waste in the industry. It's just beyond me. Sometimes people being disorganized, not having systems in place, or sometimes, I guess, lack of education with what you can do with things, or lack of perhaps, again, organization when it comes to, it takes too long. It's cheaper to just get rid of it. But I don't believe in that. I just think you got to find ways. And once you have a structure and a system, you can apply it to different type of ingredients, and you just do the same differently, pretty much.
And where did you train to be a chef?
Where did I train? Well, I went to, so I decided, I discovered that I wanted to become a professional chef during COVID. My whole life, I've had multiple lives, and my whole life I was looking for my purpose. What's my purpose? What's my mission? And I did a degree in public relations, and I have a bachelor in public relations. And I opened an art gallery in London when I was like 23, and I did that for 2 years. But then I was like, naturally, I wasn't enjoying sales necessarily that much. And we were working with emerging artists, and we had to like create stories to sell them. And I didn't necessarily like that. And I was naturally better at events and planning and, you know, everything that's more relational and all that. And I thought, okay, maybe events is the way to go. And then I believe in education. I think it's really important to educate yourself. And when I was a bit lost and I realized that the world of art wasn't for me, but hospitality most likely was, because I had, you know, even as a student, always worked in different restaurants and pubs and bars and always really enjoyed it. And, you know, I lived in all over the world, really. I lived in a lot of countries, and it fits my personality too. And so after London, I went back to Switzerland, did a degree in hospitality management, did very well, but it was front of house, and then had different experiences as a restaurant manager and like manager in different businesses, and had a bit of a existential crisis, as I call it, when I turned 28, because I realized I had found a job back in London, but I had already lived 7 years in London, and it's a big city. It's a great city. It has so much, but it just wasn't for me anymore, and I wasn't feeling fulfilled, and I didn't have a career that I really liked. Yes, hospitality was for me, but I didn't feel happy. I didn't want to be a number in a big company, and I kind of wanted to start my own business, but I didn't know what. And yeah, I was a bit lost. And my sister was living in Australia at the time. She was doing a working holiday, and I was 28, not happy with my career, you know, didn't have a mortgage, didn't have children or, you know, a husband and whatnot. So I was free to go wherever. And so I thought, well, might as well try it out. I loved Australia. I came here on holidays, thought it was a fantastic country, and thought, I'm just going to try and go back. And I came back. I was in Brisbane for a year, had a lot of fun, did my farm works because I had to. And then Melbourne was always I was going to do a year of traveling, my farm work, and then come to Melbourne and work here, see how things would go, and potentially go back to Europe. But then COVID hit. And in a few weeks, I had to make a decision. Do I go back? Do I stay? My mother on the phone was so desperate to have me back, you know. But it didn't feel right. I just felt like I felt that there's more for me here. I don't know why. I didn't feel like I wanted to go back. And I just felt, nah, I'm going to stay. I'm going to push through. I was by myself because as a, you know, foreigner abroad, ScoMo made very clear that foreigners had to go home, and decided to just push through and survive. And I guess I did. But it was such an amazing time because everyone in hospitality was stood down. The industry died pretty much, in and out of lockdowns, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I started noticing I had to find ways. Either I was going to dig into my savings or I had to find ways to survive. And I started noticing people selling food on Marketplace, Facebook Marketplace. And I thought that was very strange. I had never bought food off Marketplace. But then I realized, you know, over a few days, if they do it, I can do it. Gotta give it a try. And so I did, and I was making like home-baked goods and, you know, lasagnas and things like that. And look, it got me through lockdown. It allowed me to pay rent and stay afloat. And then at the same time, I volunteered for a charity called COVID-19 EAD. And it was starting by out-of-work hospitality people or chefs, Melbourne chefs, for hospitality people who were out of work. And they would get all the rescued produce from Oz Harvest or other organizations that rescue food and cook meals for out-of-work hospitality people in need, and thousands of meals a week. And I started off as a driver. I just thought it's a good thing to get involved. It's COVID. At least I can go around and do something good. And then they were looking for a chef, and I reached out and I told them I, cooked at home and whatnot. By the way, I can hear the oven, that this is your Reuben pie coming out, so good. I told them I didn't have much experience, but I wanted to get involved, and they took me on, and really that was kind of like an internship. I did have a bit of experience in London where I was already offered a job as a junior CDP because I was doing really well, but it was an all-male kitchen. I was 27. That was just before my existential crisis that I mentioned. And I just didn't feel that there was a place for a woman in the kitchen, especially not at 27. It's way too late. Everybody starts when they're 16, 17, and I was just like not convinced. But then working with all these chefs, and 80% of them were females, and some of them were, experienced chef, career chefs, and doing pretty well. And I just realized, no, there is a place for a woman in the kitchen. And and it kind of like opened my eyes. And at the same time, I realized, oh my God, I want to cook. I want to cook professionally, and I want to, put my all. And I was 30 at the time, so pretty late in the game. And so I had to catch up. And so went back to school and did a diploma in cookery. And so I did 2 years of cookery school, and, back from the top up. But yeah, learned my way through to the point where I was like confident enough as I was, learning basic cookery skills and learning how to work in kitchens, etc. I was also thinking, what is my style? Who am I as a chef, right? I don't want to just be a cook. I want to be me, and how does that translate into a plate of food, pretty much? And yeah, it kind of all came together, I guess, with Frankie's and the pies, all was born. And in terms of restaurants that I worked at in Melbourne, I was lucky to work in some really good restaurants, like probably the ones that where I learned the most, despite not always being good experiences, because of the nature of the industry, was, I guess I would name Farmers' Daughters as one. I did it over a year then. It was a really good experience, tough, but really, really the best training I got in the kitchen for sure. And then probably when I was head chef at Noisy Ritual, because that was the first, and it was kind of a jump for me. I had made it, I had made it to CDP, Chef de Partie, but then I never really made it in between, like Junior Sous, and I kind of had this opportunity right after COVID. A chef friend of one of the chefs I was working with in the charity I volunteered at, was looking for a hand, like someone to give them a hand. And I was out of work, and it was at Noisy Ritual, and it was only a 1 month contract, but I thought, this is great, and I'll get to learn and whatnot. So my first job out of COVID was at Noisy Ritual. Wow. And then they were also the first ones who chose to give me an opportunity as head chef. And at the time, they had a head chef that had worked for them a few years, but then decided to return to South Australia, where he was from. And they found someone else who only did 2-3 weeks in December and quit, I think, right after New Year, close to New Year, at a very tragic time or important time of the year. And they were a bit desperate. And I just happened to be in between jobs at the time, or I can't remember what I was doing, or working at Marion, I think, and not very happy at Marion, where it was the only female chefs, and they were all males, and it was very male-dominated. And, they wanted to put me in pastry, which is where the female chefs belong and whatnot. And I kind of didn't feel like that. I wanted to keep pushing, and I didn't want people to put a foot over my head. Like, I knew what I knew, and I knew what I didn't know, and where I wanted to improve. And I kind of pitched this idea at Noisy Ritual. I said, look, I haven't had head chef experience, but I do have managerial experiences of, front of house and whatnot, and I am organized, and this is my ethos, and this is my style so far, and what I've come up with, and I think I could, potentially help you out. And I guess I did do well, because I fixed their costings, helped them redesign their menu a little bit, making it a bit more wine bar-y friendly, because it was going in a bit of a different direction that didn't necessarily make sense with a winery. And I kind of proved myself, but I guess I had the opportunity to prove myself too. Yeah. But that learning experience really opened my eyes to, if I do it for someone else, I can do it for myself, really. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah.
Congratulations. What a trajectory. That's amazing.
I'm out of breath.
I am from listening to you. Because that's really impressive. And as you say, it always makes me sad, because I started conversation with a chef because of my friend Nikki in Christchurch, who I spoke, who I'd hang out with, and she would tell me about the industry, and she'd tell me about why you do certain things with food the way you do them. But she always said it was really hard. She was, as a woman head chef, you had to earn the respect of the team, whereas a male chef could go in and had to do some pretty dire things to lose respect. Yeah. And absolutely. And it's sad to hear that's still going on in some kitchens.
I mean, it is what it is. The industry needs a bit of progress. Yeah. It's still a little bit outdated. It definitely, I've worked in all-female kitchens, and I can tell you it's awesome.
Yeah.
I've worked in kitchens where there's a bit of a balance, and egos go down. Men definitely have bigger egos, and they fight all the time, and they have to be the boss and whatnot. Whereas women are a lot more collaborative, and it's all about getting together and solving problems, rather than being by yourself and showing you're the best. So it is what it is. But I do encourage women to speak up, and I do encourage women to keep pushing. And I love when I hear male chefs very supportive or acknowledging that, no, it's great to have balance. No, it's great to have, yes, a man will be stronger in strength, but then a woman will potentially be more organized, and all these things. But they'll come with time.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
But no, definitely a woman has to prove herself as opposed to a man. Just 100%.
And now that you've found your calling, your vocation, and it has been challenging, but you're still
here.
Still here. Yeah. What is it that you love about working with food and hospitality?
Well, hospitality is about making people happy. And food is about, I guess, sharing and like getting people together and being able to transform something beautiful into something else, and the process as well, working with beautiful ingredients. And I guess the end result, to see a smile on someone's face, really. You can really bring happiness with something really good, or a really good service. You can have a really bad meal, but a great waiter and still have a good time sometimes. Yeah. Maybe not if it's an awful meal, but an average to bad meal.
That's right,
anyway.
That's right. Look, thank you.
Yeah,
we couldn't even go into living in Switzerland, but that's for another time.
Yeah,
because I can smell my pie.
Yeah, someone's hungry. Yeah, and I see a smile on her face, so I'm happy.
That's right. Thank you so much for your time. And
thank you for having me
on the video with me.
Thank you. Pleasure. Yeah, awesome.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Conversation with a Chef with Francesca Giorgi Monfort from Frankie's Pie Shop. You can check out all the goodness on Instagram at Frankie's, that's FRANKIES.pie.shop. Or better still, get down to Superette on Sydney Road in Brunswick and taste it all for yourself. If you'd like to hear more stories from other chefs, I'm also on Instagram at Conversation with a Chef. You can read this chat online at www.conversationwithachef.com, and of course, follow me on Apple and Spotify podcasts. I'm actually also on YouTube now. It's very new, and let's see how it goes. I would absolutely love it if you told a friend about my chats. It's still the best way to get these delicious stories out into the world. Once again, thanks so much for listening. Have a great day, and bon appetit.